Should you go into these boutiques carrying bags from the likes of Coach? Have you ever wondered if there is a way that you should dress to go into these designer boutiques? I'm going to talk about some do's and don'ts and some ways that you can dress where you will get taken seriously, but you will also feel comfortable and like yourself. Hey everyone, so we all know that depends on the boutique, it depends on who you get in the actual boutique, but sometimes these places can feel really stuffy and they can also feel quite unapproachable. And I've spoken before about the first time that I ever went into a boutique and I felt so like I didn't belong there. And I tell you why, because at that particular moment I didn't have any money, and I certainly didn't have the money to even buy a pair of earrings, but I just wanted to go in, wanted to see what there was, and no one said anything. It was very much how I felt about me, and that's something we're going to come on to. But I did not feel worthy of being in there. And I remember going in with David. David and I hadn't been together that long, and we walked past Louis Vuitton, and I was like, oh, there was a bag in the window I liked. And he was like, why don't we go and look at it? And I was like, no, I'm not going to go look at it. I don't have any money. I'm not going to go and look at it, waste someone's time. But we went to look at it, and then years later, I didn't buy that bag because that one was like seasonal at the time, but I ended up buying another one. And so it goes to show that when you do go into these boutiques, if you have a generally nice experience, you're more likely to actually go back in the future when you are in a situation to get something. And I always think Dior are a really great example of this. I just think Dior have nailed it when it comes to their customer service. And maybe not for everyone, of course there will be people watching who have had a bad experience there, but from what a lot of you tell me, by and large, they seem to have, globally, they seem to all be the same. They've all got that same friendly mentality. So let's start with do's and don'ts, and I'm going to do these quickly because I've spoken about these in videos before, and then we're going to talk about how to dress in these luxury boutiques, things you should and shouldn't wear. So the first thing is, don't go behind the counters. In some places it's easily done, like for example Prada on the ground floor in Harrods. David and I pretty much did it the other day because the counter was set quite a bit forward from the shelf behind it, but not so far forward that actually when you stood back and looked that you realised that the counter behind the checkout or the till was actually very much one of those do not touch, go and ask someone to go and get the product for you kind of shelves. So don't go behind the counter, but it is easily done. In some places like in Chanel, it's really obvious what is behind the counter and what isn't, but in other places it can be harder to tell. But I would just generally say, when it comes to products, don't touch them. Go and ask someone else to do it for you, because also a lot of them are connected up to alarms. And I was in Prada a couple of weeks ago and I saw a couple walk in and they were really enthusiastic about this bag, and they picked it up and the alarm started going off and they were like mortified, and it was just because everything's connected to these wires. So don't touch things, go and ask for help. The next thing, and this is like quite a big one that I don't think I spoke about before, but be prepared to potentially have to wait, and don't take this as a rude thing. I think sometimes there is an assumption that because you're going to go into a luxury place and potentially spend thousands, that if you're not waited on immediately, that somehow it's a snub on you. And this couldn't be further from the case, because if you go into one of these boutiques and they're really busy, it's normal that you're going to have to wait. It doesn't mean that you're any less of a customer than anyone else. And I just mention this because in one boutique, I've seen this before where people have been asked to wait and they think that it's a snub on them, and it's not. It's just because there's like 10 million people in the queue ahead of them. And it actually in Chanel, in Harrods, they've changed this now. They've got a digital queue system, which I actually think is a lot better, because it means that when you do get seen, you can't go into the boutique unless you're next up in the queue, but it means that when you are in, you get a better service, and if there's not crowds of people, you could go and look at what you want, but don't be offended if you have to wait. Obviously, if there's no one in there and it's just you, that's different, but for the most part, all I'm saying is don't worry if you have to wait. Okay, now for the do's. You've got to talk money. Don't feel ashamed of talking about your budget. and stick to your budget. This is the main thing. Sometimes you will go into a boutique and you've saved a certain amount of money and you pretty much know what it is that you want, or you just want to be tempted and you've got this budget. Sometimes if you end up going over budget, you can come away feeling actually quite rubbish, even though you might have bought something that you love. When you've got a budget in your mind and then you overstep it, particularly if you're saving for like a house or something and then you've eaten into that budget where you said, I'm only going to spend X amount of money and you've spent more, try not do that. And I do talk about price. When I go and buy things, we're not made of money. We all go to work, we all save, we've all got our bills to pay for. And the same thing goes for the sales associates that work in these places. None of us are good, like billionaires, do you know what I mean? And I cannot say that I've ever asked how much something is and that I've been met with like any sort of snobbery at all. Not at all. In fact, I think it makes you a bit more human, and a bit more slightly in touch, I don't know, when you do have that budget. So ask for prices and stick to your budget. The other major thing, and this in a way is connected with budget, is make sure you ask to see everything that you are potentially interested in before you drop your money. Again, sometimes when you go into these places, and it depends on who's serving you, but sometimes when you go into these places you might feel rushed, probably by yourself. You probably feel like, oh, I don't want to waste this person's time. I came in here for this bag. Yeah, it looks all right. I'm just going to buy it and go so that I like leave them in peace. If you are going to go and drop this kind of money, you want to make sure that you've made the right decision on what it is that you've bought. So if you go in there and you're looking at a bag and you see it and you are actually in love with it, just make sure, have a look at some other stuff in the same price bracket. Just make sure that when you walk away, you know, okay, I looked at everything else and there was actually nothing there that I liked instead. Okay, so how to dress for these boutiques, because the thing is with them, spoken about this before, but to a degree, we all do this, okay? Not even if you're in sales, we all do it, but you get profiled. Someone will look at you, like if you take sales, for example, these SAs, their job is not easy. And they no doubt have to deal with some really difficult people. And if they have got a target to meet and two people walk in, they have got to try and decide in that moment which one looks like a sure thing over the other. And there is a certain way that you can overdo it, where you dress too much and then you look like you're not going to spend, because that happens as well. Not everyone that glams up is necessarily in there to spend. I've seen loads of people go in gym attire and walk out with bagfuls of stuff that they've bought. So the first thing to do is don't go over the top. If you're going to go in there, wear something classic, dress up. If you normally live in your gym gear, don't necessarily feel that you can't go in it, but I've spoken before about how you can wear gym outfits in a way that look like you're not going to the gym, that you're more purposefully casual that day. So for example, I've put just here some leggings with a trainer shoe that isn't a gym shoe. It's more of a pump kind of fashion sneaker. And then wear it with like a nice jacket over the top, but doing that, you can still be you can still feel comfortable, but you don't look like you've gone out for a run that day. Another question I have lots of you asking me is, should you go into these boutiques carrying bags from the likes of Coach, of Aspinall of London, of Kate Spade? And I understand why you asked me the question, and when I say I get the question, I get a lot of you email me asking this, saying, oh, I've saved enough money, I'm gonna go and buy my first bag, but the bags I have at the moment are, let's say, Coach, and you think, should I take that into the boutique? Is that gonna mark me down at all? I personally think, take those bags in. Do you know what? I've got Coach, and I've been into these boutiques with Coach bags before. I think Coach is very underrated. I think it's a really good brand, very affordable as well, and really good quality. And so if you don't have a designer bag yet, don't feel bad about going in with lesser brands. It's about how you put yourself together, and it's about walking into such a place and hitting that mark between not looking too slobbish and not looking so over the top that you look like you're being a bit desperate about it. And then the final most important bit of information that I have to share with you is be yourself. If this is your first time going into a boutique, or if it's your millionth time going in, but you still find it really awkward going into these places, think to yourself, how could I dress that makes me feel confident in my own skin? Because there's no point going all glammed up if actually that makes you feel even more awkward because it's not you. And so I always say to take your own style, just polish it that day, just make it look a little bit better. Fundamentally as well, you want to look back on the day and have it be a memorable experience. I had one of you email me earlier this year, and you actually said to me, I can't remember where you said you were in the world, but you were going to go and buy, I think it was a Louis Vuitton bag, and you were walking past Louis Vuitton, and you could have actually gone in at that moment and bought it, but I think you said you'd been caught in the rain shower and you were in scruffy clothes, and your logic was, I want to remember this day as being a good day. I want to be able to go there, dress nicely, the champagne, buy the bag, and so you went home, had a shower, got dressed, and then you went back again. And that's a really good example of where I think you want to look back on that day, look at that bag that you've just spent hard-earned money on, look back at that day and remember it actually being a good day where you felt really good about yourself, you were really nicely put together, but not too much, you felt really good about yourself, and you remember that day as being a fun one. This is, at the end of the day, this video is a bit of fun. So with any of these videos, there might be things I'm talking about that you really massively disagree with, and that, as I always say, it's completely fine, because these videos, they're all just opinion at the end of the day, and these are just things that I think work, but you might disagree, or you might have things that you think I need to add to this list. If you do, please say below actually, because I do read the comments and I like it when you mention things to me that I haven't actually thought of before. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.